Welcome to Shamanic Voices, a profound journey into the heart of shamanism led by a seasoned practitioner with over 40 years of experience and his journeyman. Join us as we learn how this ancient wisdom can help you navigate your modern life. I'm Brian Nolan, your host, a journeyman Tietia, and with me now is your co-host, Georg Breckman, a shaman Tietia. Georg, how are you doing tonight?
I'm very good, Brian. I think we have an interesting topic. I hope it's interesting to people. This is the time of year when we're all thinking about what the Christians would call All Hallows Eve or Halloween, and what the ancient Celts knew as Samhain, Samhain. Somehow, some of the Celtic derivations, that's called Samhain, and what in the Finnish world would be known as Kekiri. And we always associate this time of year with spells, magic, stuff like that, So I thought I would just go into spells, charms, magic, and magical self-defense as a topic for tonight, kind of like trying to define some of these things, lay some of these things out. And I thought it might help, for example, just going into what is magic. And certainly, in general perspective, it could be thought of as magic often refers to, this is straight out of AI, supernatural mystical powers, illusions or tricks that defy explanation. I've heard a simplified way of putting that by philosophers that magic would be defined as the manipulation of tangible, physical, or knowable reality by unseen means. It was by indirect means, by non-physical means. Historical and cultural context. In ancient cultures, magic was associated with spiritual practices, rituals, and divine intervention. Modern usage, magic can also describe illusions and stage magic, like David Copperfield, fantasy like Harry Copper, mystical or spiritual experiences, which could be just about anybody who's claiming to have them these days, and exceptional skills or talents. And some view magic also philosophically as a way to tap into hidden forces or energies, a form of symbolic expression or metaphor, and a means to transcend reality or change perceptions. So those are some different lenses through which to look at the whole topic of magic. And now I'd like to get into what specific kinds of magic maybe we in the pagan Nordic world think of. So we think of, for example, a rune bind. Rune bind magic would involve often putting one rune next to or on top of another, or sometimes joining them, like they have a common ascending line or common horizontal line, for example. And by overlapping them, overlaying them, or joining them that way, we're joining the properties that those runes represent. For instance, I might have a rune raya. And if you go back and want to look at our prior podcast where we went into detail as to what each rune meant, you can have Raido, which looks like the letter R, and is a representation of the right way, or also the right journey, overlapped with Tiwaz, which would be the rune of success or victory. And so a victorious journey, it could be a successful sales trip if you're in commerce or something like that. By overlapping the two, you might be summoning that situation for yourself. Spells as phrases. Well, the phrases could be something as simple as when someone has a disability or someone has a continual pain condition, I know what I say to myself with a broken and now very arthritic hip. I say, well, the more I do, the less it hurts. And you could say, well, that's just an attitude, but it's more than just an attitude, because physically, you start with hurt. If you push past it, just kind of like pushing past your point of exhaustion to where you get your second wind and running, which we're all familiar with if we've ever done any heavy training, there is a point of transcendence where you get past that and there's no longer pain. It's not the pain is not noticeable. it really is not there any longer. You're not getting the physical sensation. So I don't think it's mind over matter. I think it genuinely is casting a spell, not necessarily over yourself, I guess the way I put it is over your condition, so that the spell helps you to transcend the circumstance.
So do you mean literally when someone is in massive pain, whether it's they hurt themselves running or in a military excursion, and their willpower, their intention to keep going, is a spell that overrides that pain? It doesn't fix the pain, but it overrides it.
Yeah, it could be that, but I think it may actually fix it to some extent, because if you go hours without it, when you normally would not go hours without it, because you push yourself through it, then that is a form of overcoming. But when I say ritual, I mean in the sense of a ritual phrase, by saying that phrase, by making that affirmation. And you could call it an affirmation, but what is the difference between a spell, a ritually cast spell by verbs, by words, and an affirmation? There really is no difference.
That makes sense.
That's just a modern term for it when we say affirmation, like, I feel confident today. I feel like I could go out and take over the world or whatever. So you present that face to the world, they pick up your intention, and you're a little closer to getting whatever you want to get done that day done.
Or, I'm gonna, the soldier who makes it back to camp going, I'm gonna make it, even with a wound that should have been catastrophic.
Yeah, good example. And when I think of the ritually charging, which is the next thing, we say ritually charming an object or objects or space. Well, one thing we do when we create a Bengstrom, a ritually created vortex in the earth, in the ground. You have several around your house. There are some others we've left up there in your area in New Jersey. Quite a few down here, and then Tennessee and Indiana and Ohio and so on. But we're enchanting the earth and bringing about a condition that wasn't there before, where anybody who stands on that space will feel the vortex, the counterclockwise spiral of light rising through the earth, through them, and also have a sense that they can get rid of anything they want to release from themselves by having it pulled down into the earth away from themselves. So the Bengstrom serving a dual purpose for cleansing and improving the person. Now, the thing that you ran into recently, I found absolutely fascinating. So please give us your account of charming the cups.
Yeah, I had an idea. Well, I shouldn't say it was my idea. It was kind of pushed on me in a positive way by the gods and goddesses. But I was over at Walmart, and I was just about to leave. I was getting a couple things for a friend, and I got drawn to the mugs over there, and I saw, very interesting. Why did I get pulled over here? And I look down at one, and I see this one that just stands out. And I go, I knew who this is for. Perfect. So I picked up one of those, and I thought, you know what? I'll get my wife a gift, too. So I got her one, this little mushroom one. I was like, I'm going to get myself a gift, too. I deserve a gift. They're $4 mugs. Why not? So I get home with them. I'm like, oh, these are cute gifts. And I hear, bless them. I go, how so? And then as I started just getting the intuition, just kind of cut my hands around them. And I said, okay, I want me to bless these. How am I going to bless these? There's a purpose here. You drink from the cup, drinking tea, coffee, like a morning ritual. Keyword here. And I said, okay. I just started kind of going into a more of a channeling, and I asked for the first one, the Shining Ones, if anyone is willing to step forward and assist in the blessing of this cup, and to guide me on how to bless this for that person that was going through a very tough time and changes in their life, to utilize this as a tool when needed. And I do not remember exactly what came out, but I remember one was Velamo coming through and showing me that as they were stressed and overwhelmed with all the anxiety and emotions and everything going on, as they sip from the cup, the waters of compassion would be imbued with it from the double-bottom lake of Sirius, flowing through the body, feeling that wash through the body to the feet. And then a couple other gods and goddesses came through during this process and showed me how they would like to do it. I remember for this one as well, Ur from the Sisters of Fate, she showed me that she would utilize this to help reweave as they sipped and contemplated during meditative practices, relaxing the emotional events of the past that were tied into the manifestation of the current person's psyche and everything else, to start leaving the emotions in the past and the blackened spots of the loom to be reweaved, just naturally through this process, through introspection. And then I did this for my wife and my own mug, and actually, this is this is the mug that I have. It says "Slow the Sloth Down." It's a very cute little mug, and I didn't really know what the purpose of this one was, and I just know that I need to slow down sometimes because I go way too fast, and sometimes I can't connect with the client. And Uko helped bless this mug specifically, and being a doctor himself, in a sense, I know it's really low compared to what he really is, but in that sense, when you first introduced him to me, as a way to, when I needed to slow down, to either connect with the client, connect with myself, to have this imbued with a calming notion, to connect with the client and really step into their worldview completely to help them. So I wasn't imposing my values or my own ego onto them in the session and just in general life. And I find myself then sitting with it when I do feel a little overwhelmed doing schoolwork and all the things I'm doing, and feeling it every time I sit. And when the girls came home, I had them put their hand over the mug, and they could actually feel coming off the top. They're like, what is this? I said, oh, that's magic. It wasn't my idea, it was the gods, but use this when you want.
Well, that is great. That is great. I am remembering, I wish I could be more specific on that. I think it was 4.5 years ago, something like that, maybe 5, having Michelle and Callie over here. And I had put some water, purified water, and it may have just been rainwater that I collected, actually. I'm trying to remember the occasion. I think I did. I had a big barrel out on the back porch, and it just rained like crazy at that time. Just one of those times when we get like, 1.5 foot of rain in a week type of stuff. So you really could,
yeah.
If you put anything out, you could collect some nice water for making your coffee or tea that didn't have any over taste to it. Putting that on the Bankstrom for, I think, a couple of weeks. And then they were over here for something. I don't remember. I think we were working with somebody really bad issues in her 80s and trying to correct her. I think you later met the individual I'm thinking of. But in that process is, well, why don't we consecrate 3 little files? And I had it in files. I've got these files. Let's just see each one being consecrated to a particular one of the wells that's in the world tree. The Mimersbrunner, the well of Mimers area, the Nornersbrunner, the well of the Sisters of Fate at the root of Yggdrasil, and Helgrimer, the roaring fountain, the fountain of life force. And sure enough, we did that. And they've been sitting back. I've used them just a couple of times when it seemed like somebody's really low on life force, and it seemed to really help. So there's an example of just charming something. And it sounds weird. Just think about it. Churches have the water, the holy water. That's just the only thing that makes it holy water. It could have come right out of the municipal tap. Is that some priest blessed it, did a ritual over it. So
Right.
Even if you're Christian, ritual magic is very much woven into your faith. You just don't call it ritual magic.
I think often the term ritual has a bad connotation tied to it, where people associate it with something negative, and ritual is not negative. I mean, there of course is negative magic, where people have malintention and malicious endeavors and using it to garner things that inflate the ego or monetary gain and all these other things that are not for the good. Sometimes they don't even know what they're doing. But ritual itself is not bad. Just like a gun is not bad.
It's a neutral tool like any other tool. And if you think about the talisman, which is another thing we think of connected with magic, we're speaking, of course, of these objects as something that you would use or interact with. But there's also the talisman like that you might wear. You certainly bless the talisman you wear around your neck, or one that you wear in your cloak, or one I've got like on my front door that shows the Inga Shomer, the navigational and protective area for space that's up there. There are many ways that you can do this. And it's not that different from, I forget what it is. There's some particular saint, you might know what it is with your formerly Catholic background, where you're getting ready to sell your house. You put this little statue of Saint so-and-so out there. It helps your house to sell more quickly. It is a real custom. Because
I think I've heard of this. I don't remember what it was, though.
I had a neighbor do it who was in the process of moving. He was trying to sell me some of his used furniture. And I asked him what the heck the statue is. Oh, that's Saint so-and-so, and it helps us move a house more quickly. So I don't know if it did or not, but it's a pretty desirable location, so we didn't have any difficulty selling it either way.
As long as you sell it, it refurbs it, though. That's all that matters.
Yeah, of course. Or blessing a cross before you wear it, or whatever form it takes. But anyway, that would be a talisman. The other thing we think about with regard to interaction with physical objects, I think, is the magic of setting wards. And the ward could be as simple as seeing your house surrounded by a bubble, a large upside-down parabola, bouncing anything, a dome, if you will, bouncing anything that's negative off it to protect you. That would be warding. Warding a space, setting up a protective perimeter, through which anything evil or untoward cannot come.
Yeah.
So that's another form of it.
Well, people get a kick out of when they come over to the therapy room here. They'll walk into this room, and it's just immediately colder. And that's a protective bubble that's set up around here, not just by arm magic, but the EDs as well. So they get confused, like, why does it feel so different in here? It feels like heavier. I go, yep. This is a safe space.
Exactly. That's what safe spaces should feel like. You're right. And there's magic by imaging, and emotion is the charging force of magic. I made a lot of notes here, so I'm kind of referring to them as summoning the power of the gods or goddesses. And we can summon it into an object. We can do it by recitation or ritual, as we do, for example, at summer solstice, where we do drinking lisu, which is drinking in the light, where we all concentrate on standing in the middle of a stone circle and bringing in the fading light at the longest day of the year. It's pretty powerful. It really charges you up. So again, it's just a matter of the whole group bringing in life force to everybody that's standing in the middle there. It's an interesting thing to see happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's the sense also the unseen worlds can be as dangerous as the spirit, as the physical world. So it behooves us to know about magic and magical self-defense. So shielding yourself is certainly one thing that you can do, just picturing once a day and the way we learn in our tradition is placing a crystal into the area that we know as the Meath Orther, the area between the solar plexus and the navel, which is kind of looked at as the second brain, so to speak. Another area is rich with nerve endings. As what you're putting in there is something that then goes out to the shape of the entire body, is contiguous with the entire body. It goes out quite a ways outside of the body to allow in only positive or transmissions or communications or relationships of integrity, not of hostility or control or anything like that. So that's one form of shielding. And we can also ask for the blessing from higher beings. And I think of a particular incident just after my son and members of his unit, which was a specialized reconnaissance unit of the 101st Airborne, were about to go over to Iraq for the Iraq War. I think this would have been in the fall of 2007, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's about when it was. He and his battle buddy were down, and his battle buddy was a Hispanic kid, really nice kid, very sensitive, very psychic, naturally. And I invited he and Antonio to the lady I was involved with at the time, Jamile, who was from Central America and untypically very tall and fair, but for being from that part of the world. But she was definitely well aware of all the traditions and had studied the, might say, the type of magic known through the Andes at some length. So I thought it was good to have her involved also as kind of the priestess blessing him while I blessed Torrin in our tradition. So I recited over both of them the warrior's blessing, which goes something like, before these warriors set out upon the sea to attack the foe, to defend the homeland, bring them back unscathed, maybe they vanquish all before them, and return unharmed. And it's very simple like that. And she did a blessing over them also. And they both really felt it, okay? After that, about 2 days later, we were taken to a little kind of banquet for the friends he grew up with here. And some of the buddies he had would come down here and party at my house all weekend. Believe me, you don't want a bunch of paratroopers partying at your house all weekend. Not a good idea. No. Well, they know how to raise hell. I said, next time you guys come down, get a motel room, okay? Which they did do next time they came here. Welcome to visit, but don't spend the night. So anyway, we're all sitting around and we're getting them whatever they wanted. They wanted to go to a steakhouse. So I think we forget that the place that has sweet potatoes where you have the peanuts laid out on the floor. I forget which one that is. Not Texas Roadhouse, one of the other ones. Anyway, we're all there. And I was going to get a picture of the two of them together. They were sitting right across the table from me. So I looked in my camera. That's weird. There's this line around them. I think there's something screwed up in my camera, or the light's not right in the room. I looked at anybody else. I didn't see it. So I asked Emily's son, who was there, who was, like a 25-year-old techie nerd and a real good kid, but very good nose for that kind of stuff. He said, Michael, may I borrow your camera? So I looked. He said, sure. That's weird. Where's this line coming from? So I asked somebody else. Line was still there, so I took a picture. They took a normal picture, and I wondered about the line. And my ex was there, and she says, his mom says, what do you think that is? I said, I think that's the bubble of protection around them. That's what they're going over there with. Well, fast forward 15, 16 months, I forget when it was, I think it was about 16 months later, they all come back. And by that I mean, they all came back. And
which is a rarity.
Not one was crippled, not one was badly wounded. They all came back. And the odds would have been against that. So yes, I think that there is such a thing as blessing, an excursion, an event, whatever. And that's one example of a type of magic. And so we ask these unseen beings from another dimension to help us. What is that but magic?
And isn't what often Anglo-Saxon sorcerers and people in the past would bless armies and military and other contingents for war to deflect against metal and the elements? Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I think this was done. It's probably common in the ancient world. I don't know that it wasn't, Makes sense that it would be.
Well, I remember in The Way of Weird, this was The Way of Weird by Brian Bates. They talked about this.
Yeah, they probably did.
Very interesting. When I first read that, it made a lot of sense. And I find it funny that I have a couple of clients whose kids I work on, and they call me the sorcerer or the wizard.
Well, as long as they don't call you the lizard, you're ahead of the game.
Right? No, we're not going that way. Don't worry.
And I'm thinking also of, I did the same sort of blessing on my daughter who had a problem with drugs for about a decade and a half. I'm sorry, I'll have to edit that slamming noise out, but she had, that's the clipboard hitting the tray. And I placed a bubble of protection on her, realizing that her lifestyle was very dangerous. Well, she had moved out of state with a fiance, moved up to Tennessee, and was coming back at the summoning of her probation officer, not supposed to move out of state without their permission. And on the way back, got so distraught about it, was absolutely certain she was going to get arrested. Her mom was driving her, having picked her up in Memphis. She threw herself out of the car at 55 miles an hour on the interstate. Okay. And this is just how these things work. An ambulance was coming right back from the nearby city, making a run right back toward the hospital that she would be in, saw the accident, stopped and picked her up immediately. She wasn't on the ground 2 minutes before she was on a gurney and in the back of that ambulance and on the way to the hospital. I got a call from the hospital, and I was kind of expecting the worst, and it turned out not a bone was broken. The worst she got of it was dyskinesia, a dysregulation of the nervous system, which unfortunately never went away after that. Darn lucky to have survived it. On another occasion, years later, just before finally kicking the addiction about 5.5 years ago, she was arranged to meet some shady character in a nearby parking lot. He and his homeboy took her money, knocked her down, threw her crutches over on the side. Yeah, she'd crutched her way down there to meet them, and ran over her. She had tire marks across her chest. And a UPS driver had been making a delivery at the time, got the whole thing on film, which the police never requested. They never did anything to follow up on the case. And this would be typical of their attitude toward people that are in drugs, like, hey, if there were fewer of them, so much the better.
Yeah.
Made no effort to apprehend these guys. But he saw it and called the ambulance immediately. And there was no serious damage done, surprisingly enough. I don't know how that happened, but again, this to me would show that the blessing had been effective.
Well, you hear about the concept of a mother's love or a parent protecting a child, and somehow you'll have them find superhuman strength to lift up a car off of someone. You'll have people's prayers from whatever faith you are around someone actually protect them. So that intention's powerful.
Oh yeah, no question about it.
And likewise, when you spread hate towards someone, that's also powerful.
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, what people throwing the negative stuff out there don't realize is it's got a big boomerang effect.
Yeah.
You throw that stuff out, it tends to come right back to the center, one way or the other.
Well, and to add on to that as well, not just the hate towards others, but when we have this self-hate, whether it's body dysmorphia, all these things, it manifests in illness, and we can literally attack ourselves with magic by. Obviously, most of the time people would not be aware of that, but they can create illnesses in themselves. They can create dysregulation. They can affect their own neurotransmitters in their body just from that, from a physiological side as well as a spiritual side. And
well, this gets down to the idea of, well, what is an autoimmune disease? Quite often, it is the person's consuming themselves. You know?
A slow suicide in a sense.
Yeah. So let's look again. We're talking about protection. So this is giving protection to others, wishing protection on others for various reasons, or just in general for somebody who might be in a dangerous lifestyle or in a dangerous occupation where they surely need it. But I would say also that you can use critical thinking skills to root out as kind of antisocial impulses or impressions, and never take for granted the accuracy of a disturbing impression you may have. Always question the source. And of course, knowing yourself, first of all, by spending time alone and getting to know yourself, not always being in a group of people, always pressing you to put on the looking glass self for their pleasure or their interface for social lubrication, so to speak. But spending time alone where you are your authentic self, just out there in the elements or out there with a task that you're trying to accomplish, and meditating are very important, just to strip away that veneer, whether your meditation is moving meditation, like in Sadhura or Daichi Chuan, anything like that, or whether it's true seated or standing meditation, whatever form it takes for you, just getting to what's real. You're much less likely to be misled by stuff. And a large part of this spiritual self-defense is knowing the difference between something that you may be getting from outside and what's authentic material. Like if you get a sudden gut dislike for somebody, you don't know why, question it. Is that being sent to you by someone else? Is that something projected by the media? Is that something even real?
Yeah.
Is that just an image that somebody created to manipulate you? So anyway, those are just examples of avoiding misjudgments or antisocial impulses or whatever. And let's see, what else do we have here?
Just on that real quick, that goes in the group thing as well, where, you meet someone and you at first go, ooh, this person, I like them. And the people around influence you, and they don't like them for some reason. Maybe they're too pretty, maybe whatever it is. And you get influenced by this, and your gut will literally change from the outside influence because you care more about what that social group thinks than your own self.
Sure. And there's that tendency to want to go along to get along,
Yeah.
To want social approbation. So again, this is also a matter of not just avoiding something harming you directly, but avoiding something siphoning off your life force, something alien taking from you, diminishing who you are, diminishing your spirit, because they don't belong there anyway. So, and again, one of the ways we do this is what we would pray to Odin, the father of magics, to Lohi, the goddess of shamans and sorcerers, or to Freya, the goddess of magic, to rebuke the parasite, or rebuke the predator, the spiritual predator that might be there. Again, you might find yourself feeling drained around somebody, like if you just, and they may not be doing it deliberately, just taking your life force, even if you're having a very polite conversation with them. If you're talking to somebody on more than one occasion, let's say repeatedly, and you constantly feel drained, you start getting sleepy, having a long conversation, question it. It may be that there's something inside them that is sucking in the energy of other people.
Yeah.
And this would be, psychic vampirism. Again, maybe not intentionally on their part. Or maybe they are just naturally deficient life force. They're reaching out for yours.
Yeah.
And again, the idea of setting up wards, it could be around your physical space, the space you live in. It could be around your vehicle. It could be around your body. But setting up wards is important to magical self-defense. So that's kind of an overview of magic. And we think of magic when we think of Samhain or Kekiri. And Kekiri, as I recall, is a pretty charming ritual. I found a posting a long time ago about Kekiri in old Finland. I hope it still goes on today. I had an opportunity to see it a couple of times. The younger people in the village, maybe teenagers, say 13 to 16, something like that, might dress up kind of ghoulishly. But the idea was not to embody evil spirits, but to chase away evil spirits, because with the ritual of Kekiri, you're lighting a candle, at least in some traditions of it, that's different from different places, and you're inviting in a departed loved one, a departed ancestor, maybe it's a grandparent or whatever, a great aunt, or just maybe an old friend of the family, whoever it was, or maybe even somebody young who was taken by many of the traveling illnesses, the epidemics that used to sweep through the population when not everybody grew up, and you're inviting them to come back and visit you on this one night when the veil between the worlds is thinner. It's a good time for them to come visit. And so the kids dress up like that, and we'll go from door to door, maybe singing a song or performing something like that, usually a magical chant, maybe out of the Kalevala, to scare away anything that shouldn't be there, or to invite in the spirits, or the positive spirits who should be there. And then they would be given maybe it wouldn't be junk, it would be some homemade cakes or something like that, maybe funnel cakes or something, pleasing, dried fruit, whatever it was going to be, to thank them for their performance. So hence the origin of the trick or treat, so to speak. And
nowadays, if you did that, they'd be where there's drugs in your food or something.
Possibly so, but this is
which are expensive, by the way.
Where you didn't worry about all that stuff. So and you knew your village, you knew your neighbors and so on. So, but that's too much like like a homogenous society. We can't have that.
Well, you know what they do up here now for Halloween?
What?
They do something called trunk or treat. where all the kids are too scared that the little white van, well, big white van, is going to run around and kidnap them. They all go up the street to the strip mall. All the cars pop their trunks and they go trunk to trunk trick or treating. And then the police are there with their metal detectors to make sure there's no razor blades in your candy, and you can go home. Oh, yeah, no, that's literally, we don't get trick or treaters anymore. It sucks.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the culture of fear.
Yeah, I used to have them come here from time to time. And then what I noticed was sometime maybe in the early 90s, kids that were not from the neighborhood at all would just come in here mooching. He's like, 10 kids from here you've never seen before, definitely not from here. Never with a dad, with always just a mom, if anyone. And I was like, okay, well, give them candy. But it's like, are you from around here? No, we're from. And you know where the place was. So
we're going to the nicer houses. They get bigger candy.
I guess that was the idea. So I just quit turning the light on the night when that happened. I said, okay, it's not a neighborhood thing anymore. I'm not in it.
Yeah, it's kind of stopped.
Let them do it. Let them do it in their neighborhood. I don't go to theirs. I don't send my kids to theirs to get it. So why come here?
Yeah.
And of course, I did have this big black cat at the time, and Blackie loved the attention. He would absolutely get on the front porch or in the front door, in the front window where he was clearly this one. Oh, a black cat. He was, I'm the bomb. He was eating up all the attention. He was just a very sweet cat. He liked a big male. Yeah. Anyway, so.
So for people that are on when the veil is very, very thin right now, and people are seeing things, a lot of people around you are experiencing things they've never experienced before. I don't know if it's extra thin now than normal, but there's a lot of stuff moving. But for people who want to celebrate this in a way, so you said they light a candle to invite in their ancestors that have passed from epidemic and other various ailments.
You could invite a specific one in. We had a very nice incident happen several years ago at not too far away from me at where Aubrey and Dan used to live, just a couple of miles from me. And everybody was over there, and this gal from Athens was there, and she lit the candle, and she was very close to her step-grandfather. And she specifically invited him in, and just suddenly she was crying. I said, "Are you okay, Marge?" And she said, yeah. She said, he was just telling me stuff that I never knew before about my mom before, when I was just really little, and about the family. And I never asked what the stuff was, but apparently it was a very genuine communication going on. And she was just absolutely feeling his presence and hearing his discourse as he was describing things to her.
Yeah.
And saying how much he enjoyed knowing her when she was little and growing up and all that before he passed. So it was, things like that happen sometimes, which is always pleasant. So that's just some thoughts about the thinning of the veil. There was also the way the Finnish year was broken down. It was like Kekiri was the beginning of this intermediate period, the name of which I'm forgetting, between then and Yule. Yule being, of course, the winter solstice. And then the new year would start really beginning right after that. But it's kind of this intermediate period, I guess, switching into heavy winter, which you're getting into heavy winter by the end of October. Yeah, it's throwing down out there,
Yeah.
It's dropping. Yeah. You've got all your animals gathered into the barn. You've got everything gathered in that you're going to have. And at Kekiri, you might also have like a ritual feasting, something like that going on. And wouldn't be at all uncommon to have divination going on at the same time. Rune casting, whatever you're doing. So
right.
Just some thoughts on that. Oh, and yes, the jack-o'-lantern. Well, pumpkins came over from the New World much later. The original and the one I saw was you'd have a big sugar beet or was it a rutabaga maybe? Something like that, a big squash or sugar beet or a turnip. I remember seeing turnip cut with one side flat like that. And I mean, they'd be like that big around. Big fertile soil type turnips. They do better in a cold climate, actually. And then it would be cut out in a way. I guess they'd hollow out the inside where the top fit on the bottom. And you would have the space for the teeth and the eyes and all that. And there'd be a little wick of lamb's wool in the middle of it and a bunch of lamb fat sitting in there. And so as it burned, it gave off this reddish kind of light because it didn't burn very hot. It's
Ah.
kind of neat to see this little reddish light coming out of the sputtering wick and kind of flickering like that. It definitely set the mood. Yeah. And
For
of
our
course,
for
this
our
again,
pumpkins this year, we saw this thing where you just score the outside of your little outline, then you take a cheese grater just to kind of grate the outside, and you put it in the chicken coop, and you let the chickens carve the pumpkin.
really,
Yeah, it was fun.
did they do it?
Yeah, they carved exactly where you scored because that's where they went in through, and then ate the
Wow.
inside of the pumpkin. And if you
You
left
you
it,
gotta you gotta send me pictures of that next time you do it.
I will. We left them in there too long. They just continued eating the pumpkin.
Yeah,
So
that would be a problem. You wouldn't have any pumpkin left, right?
no,
Right.
no, they got it clean, but it was a fun little thing to do. So
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I would imagine you could also empty out the innards of the pumpkin. They would probably eat all of that, and the
oh,
seed and
they
all that
ate
would be good
everything. It
for
was
them.
just the skin left.
Wow. Well,
The
thanks for sharing
little
that.
lawn raptors, they'll eat anything.
Yeah, that's a little chicken artistry on the pumpkin. I'll have to mention
Yeah,
that to Jeff since he has a flock of chickens in his backyard too. That's an interesting idea.
it was fun. It was fun.
Well, any other thoughts about magic now that I've laid out my premise for how it works and all that?
Well, aside from the ritual for a Kekiri for inviting in ancestors, is there anything that you would want to leave people with currently, with everything going on? We have the election next week here in America, and everyone is uh, at wit's end, to put a sense. No matter what side you are on, everyone is hitting this point where they don't know what to do. They're overwhelmed. The media throws so much at them. So when it comes to everything going on, what would you suggest to them from a ritual sense to find calm in the storm? Because, of course, there's certain conflicts that you understand you vote, you have no more power than that, except voting local, all this type of stuff. And for me, of course, through a lot of work to understand you can't attach the emotions to conflicts that you have no control over. But you have to get there. It's a lot of practice.
I think one of the things you can do is just to try to ground yourself in reality, like look at source documents. Don't listen to 2 or 3 words out of context from a hostile source quoting somebody's speech. Go and hear the whole speech and see if he really said what they said he said. Don't depend on some independent so-called fact checker supported by large corporations, funded by people with a vested interest in one side of a conflict. Go do your own checking. It's not that hard to do.
Well, of course.
Don't listen to a soundbite instead of reality. Reality begins by hearing the whole thing in context as what was actually said. And then you realize that this idea of trying to demonize a political opponent really doesn't have a place in the way we're supposed to do things. If you want to hold them accountable for their record, fine. That's legitimate.
Well,
you want to talk about what they did, that's legitimate. But to go and make stuff up by misquoting and out of context, and even sometimes very carefully electronic and manipulating the speech to make it sound a particular way, that's not cool. And that's just set up to create conflict and division, which is most unnecessary. So that's one factual way I think we can avoid that. You can also just see and pray for peace and go back to what is the foundation principles? The founding principles are what? In the U.S., a constitution. It was a brilliant piece of work reflecting the values of the Enlightenment, which are never obsolete. They're based on the highest of our human natures. And ask yourself, what is actually in accord with the values expressed in the Constitution, and what is not in accord with that?
Well, often what I see, the issue is some people right now, especially my generation and the younger one especially, they're so overwhelmed that when they even try to start with any of it, they shut down. So from a sense of a ritual or magically, especially with the veil being so thin right now, and people feeling things they never felt before, is there something you suggest for listeners and viewers, for not just now, but in the future as well, that when they are feeling so overwhelmed, to allow them to find that calm in the storm and see through the things, to almost not just enhance the critical thinking, but to be able to find the space to even do it? Because often we're kept in such this sense of chaos between 70-hour work weeks, constant batter by sound bites, where when you go to sit down, you have nothing left.
Well, I think for people like that, the best thing to do is just withdraw to what you know and focus on yourself, your immediate surroundings, your family, the things you're working on, and don't expend yourself on the greater questions, the big questions, the societal dramas, because you can't handle it. And be aware of the fact that you can't handle it, rather than exhausting yourself with things that are really outside your ability to. It's not to say that maybe years from now you get in a more stable situation, you have more time to become a public citizen, but right now you lack the wherewithal.
That makes sense. I mean, I know what I do is in the mornings when as a ritual between, just like when you brush your teeth, shielding self and having intention with the shield to combat the outside stuff. So that's what I mean. So to any viewers out there, as we are going into these difficult things, part of the shielding or any other thing that you're doing is to repel the constant influence of everyone else around you so you can think for yourself. Don't let other people think for you.
Absolutely. And, you're speaking of a magical influence. I heard this, and I don't remember the name of the group, but it was some sort of consortium of witches, a pretty large one in the country, that said they were trying to put harm onto the Trump campaign and Trump followers.
I heard about this, yeah.
Yes. And this is a very real thing. And the article came out that they were expressing their concern that it didn't work. He was just getting more and more popular and getting more percentage points in polls. So how on earth was this possible? I thought, well, maybe he's got some higher forces on his side. You ever think about that? Of course, they don't think about that. So the stuff you're doing is bouncing right off him.
I saw a couple of people actually talk about how they had, when they cast spells on him, they actually had bad things happen to them.
Yeah, right.
Now listen, karma comes around at some point, however you want to look at it. But
this gets around to why you shouldn't go doing negative things that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just try to put out blessings and try to put out good stuff, and don't go starting fires that you can't extinguish.
Yeah. And if you feel your emotional drives going out of control, take a moment, calm yourself. All those headlines that have joy in them and all these emotions, that's all neurolinguistic programming. Take a moment, find your center. Think with the prefrontal cortex that you built for hundreds of thousands of years, not the emotional brain.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Just take a second to think.
And if you start having a strong emotional reaction to something, do a little digging, look it up, find the other side of the picture. If there is another side that can be found, can be located, it can be hard to do. There's a lot of censorship, but try to dig up the other side of it and get a balanced view before deciding, before letting your emotions get swayed. Realize that's a way to bypass your logical thinking skills, bypass your frontal cortex.
And don't go into the instant gratification. Don't just take a second. Revisit it if it's an important decision. Take a moment. Visit it hours later, the next day. Visit it with a cool head. If you come up with the same conclusion, great. Sometimes your intuition, spot on, great. Sometimes it's not. So if they differ, take that moment, really think about it.
Yeah, I just heard a really cool, just saw a podcast by this guy. His first name is Amir, A-M-I-R. I forget his last name. And he's a gay black man. And he was going through headline after headline, all these accusations, and saying, hey, there's a gay wedding at Mar-a-Lago. How can you say he's anti-gay? There's all this other stuff. He went through all this stuff that was done to help minority communities get ahead, be prosperous, and all that. These are just plain out lies. Now, we can argue about whether you like this policy or that policy. Fine, that's legitimate. But making stuff up out of whole cloth, that is not how the democratic process is supposed to work. Slandering somebody just because you find them an effective spokesman for the other side, that's not acceptable.
Yeah, aren't we taught as kids that, the golden rule, don't slander people, do unto others as you wish to be done upon you. If it's all slander out there, listen, normally the person slandering is the one who's doing it.
And usually projecting on themselves.
And if both are doing it, they're just two toddlers having a tantrum. Shut up and look at the policies.
Definitely look at the policies. Yeah, always. Well, anyway, I wish everyone a happy Samhain transition between fall and winter in a lot of parts of the country where it's getting really cold right now, probably where you are, right?
Yeah. We're starting to get we're getting the nights at around 40, but then it's back up to 80 degrees during the day. So it's a little bit weird up here right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need some rain, but hopefully it balances out soon.
All right. Well, anyway, we enjoyed visiting with you guys. And next time we may be starting a little bit of an interesting series. We'll be going into a life redeemed from severe torture and abuse to productivity and transcendence. And that's a series we'll be starting hopefully in our next podcast.
Yep.
And I think you'll find it a very, very interesting. It'll probably be in several parts. And the person who will be interviewing is putting it all together right now. We'll be sharing it with you. So thank you for joining us here on Shamanic Voices. So saying good night here for Georg Breckman and for Brian Nolan.
Go with the gods.
Go with the gods.
Thank you for joining us on Shamanic.